Today in our part of the world we got our first proper layer of snow. I've always hated winter. I hate the cold. I hate the fact that you can't do anything outside and not the least can't ride your motorcycle. But since I've got my workshop, I've actually started appreciating the beauty of a snowy weather, for example, and actually started looking forward to winter, where I spent a lot of time in my nice and cozy workshop. Hi, my name is Søren. Welcome to the fifth entry in my diary and into my warm, cozy and nice workshop. I've been thinking about the format of my diary. Initially I only wanted to show what I'm doing in the workshop and actually only what I'm machining. And that's the reason for making these side notes to my diary about the roof. But it seems that there's a general interest in the other things I sort of digress with. So I'm probably going to throw everything into to this diary. In this video I'm going to do some maintenance on the Dart, on the car also, and I'm doing a proper machining job. I've actually got my first order from outside. It's a good friend of mine who's also a Marini fanatic, probably even more than I am. He wanted me to make some parts for an oil filter build, an external oil filter build he's doing on one of his Marinis. And I'm a bit anxious about the job because everything he does is perfect. So I'll do my very best. Hope you will enjoy. It's raining cats and dogs outside. I don't know if it's audible on the video, but some people told me before I got it began on the roof that was the worst thing about a steel roof, that you will have a lot of noise when it was raining. But even with the worst rain, I don't think it's very much noise that you get from the roof. And besides that, I really enjoy listening to the rain coming on the roof. It's like camping, and in every day I really enjoy keeping track of the weather. So to me it's another gift with this roof, and simply the knowledge that that it's tight makes it even more enjoyable to hear this rain coming down. As you probably guessed, I was tightening the chain and lubricating it. I know this was part of my shop tour, but here I show again how I set up my lift as a motorcycle lift. I had some other problems with the Dart. It was running bad at idle speed and was actually going out sometimes, and the idle was simply too low. So I had to look further into the problem. I don't know if this was a part of the shop tour, but here I show my trapeze in the corner, and a lot of people have been wondering about its function. And it's simply to hold, for example, fairings when I work on the Darts. A lot of fairings have been ruined because they've been lying on the floor and things like that, and I don't want it to clutter up the workshop while I'm working. As you can see, I found quite a lot of dirt in the float chamber. I also cleaned the idle jets and adjusted the idle. That seemed to be the solution to the problem. You might notice that I run the Dart with open pot fillers, and I would actually recommend it for the Dart as the only Marini. The other ones I wouldn't, because of the turbulence involved. But with the Dart you get several advantages. Of course you get the better flow, and you need to go with bigger main jets. I think I run mine with 128. And the other advantage, or another one, is that you get more room to work on while doing maintenance. The front cylinder is still a problem though because of the frame and the oil cooler. I was checking the valve clearance because I've recently changed the head because of a loose valve seat. Here I find the top dead center on the compression stroke simply by putting a screwdriver to the piston. The gap is set to 1/10 of a millimeter, but a lot of people talk about it being better to have it to 12 or 13 hundredths of a millimeter. I don't know if anyone can make it correctly to 12 or 13th of a hundred, but I always do it like this. I make sure that the 1/10 gauge will go easily through, and then the 15 or the 1500s gauge won't go through. So it's about there. Goes easily through, and this one won't go through. So that's somewhere between 1/10 and 1500ths of a millimeter. The worst thing about doing maintenance on a Dart is, of course, you have to remove all the plastic to get to the vital parts. To make this job a bit easier, I've, for that reason and that reason alone, bought a small cordless screwdriver. And I would actually recommend it, and even call it an essential special tool for Dart owners. As you can see, I'm not working on the engine today. I probably should, because I still haven't found the problem. But at least the car is starting on a regular basis, so I haven't felt the motivation to do anything about it. But the brakes were rather overdue, so I had to get some new pads, and because someone, that is me, has been driving the car a bit too long, one of the discs was rather badly damaged. So I decided to turn it. As you can see, I'm indicating on the seating surface. The way I'm doing it isn't quite the proper way. Normally you would turn both sides at the same time, so you will get a disc that is completely parallel. But with a bit of indicating, you can get by. I'm not really caring about the centering of the disc, because I don't think it's of any importance. The main thing is that the brake surface is running true to the seating surface. Here I'm measuring the if the disc is parallel, and it's within 1/2 of a hundredth of a millimeter. So it's rather perfect, and I'm of course also indicating here, and besides a couple of places where the disc is uneven, it's running rather true. Again, I'm not worrying about the centering of the disc. At the inside diameter there's a recess, so the complete braking surface will get turned. You might notice that there's still one score on the inside of the disc, but I didn't want to remove too much of the thickness of the disc because it's rather worn as it is. So yeah, that's the reason for not completing the job. For the assembly, I always use copper grease. I use that for most non-moving parts. The tail you see wagging behind the caliper is the tail of my neighbor's dog that comes to visit me every day. The first I'm going to make are two of these. I don't quite know where they're going, but it's for hydraulic pipe. It's going in here. It's going to be hard soldered here. So and I'm making it in my usual C45. I'm rather fond of my diamond tool holder and use it a lot. As you can see, it will take quite some beating to it. So even though it's kind of expensive, I think it's well worth the money. I'm turning the whole thing in one go, so to say. I'm turning all inside and outside diameters from one side. Ideally, and especially if you were to make more than just a couple, you would turn one side, part it off, turn it around, and then turn the other side. And chuck it in some sort of colored chuck or equal. I don't have a color chuck, and chucking it with a 3-jaw chuck would be problematic because of it's a very short stop to to chuck, and also the walls are very thin after the inside diameter has been drilled. So I'm simply using a parting tool to cut the or to turn the other side. It doesn't really matter because this it's not a moving part, so the surfaces don't need to run through, but for my own satisfaction, I like to make sure that everything is running through. So that is also an argument for doing it like I do it here. The inside diameters, I'm reaming to get a decent surface, and of course also to make sure that at least this 10 millimeters where the hydraulic piping is going to be hard soldered to has the right dimension. I'm chamfering the edges with the file. I don't want too much chamfer on such a small object. It's hard to get a nice surface with these with this C45, especially these small diameters. So I'm polishing a bit, even though it doesn't matter because everything is going to be painted. But for my own satisfaction, I'm doing it, and it also looks nicer when you hand it over. For trimming the length of the other side, I'm simply chalking it very lightly and with some emery tape between the jaws and the workpiece. So the next thing is to make this flange for the oil filter. The big challenge is to make this fat groove here. The thread, the M20 with 1.5mm pitch, should be no problem because Jørgen brought a tap fork for cutting it, so that should go quite easy. And he also delivered material that has somewhat the correct dimensions. The groove in the thread I'm going to make on the lathe in my Peugeot truck. I was considering doing it on the milling machine with my boring head, simply to have an interesting job with the boring head. But it's a lot easier to make it on the lathe, so that's what I'm doing. There's no straight edge on this piece of aluminum, so I'm going to cut it down to almost the right size, a couple of millimeters over, so when it's finished in the lathe I'm going to skim it to make the surfaces look nice. And I'm using this cutter that I bought very cheap and made a holder for, and it's made the same way as I did with my small my small fly cutter. Sadly, I don't. I haven't found a surface plate for the right price yet, so I'm using my table, and yeah, of course, you know that's not the most precise way to do it, but this requires not that much precision. So for this job, it's okay. I really need glasses. I want the workpiece just outside the jaws, so I can skim the outer surface when I'm finished. I don't have any parallels yet. I'm still looking. As usual, it's a question of money for my part. But I have this piece of aluminum that has actually has the right dimension for leaving it just outside the jaws. Yeah, and then I simply put the live center in. Yeah, well, it could be a dead center also, but and then it's just a matter of carefully tightening every jaw. And I'm also going to indicate, or at least try to indicate it, because this raw material is 20 millimeters, and he wanted it to be 20 millimeters. And as I have to skim both surfaces, I can't take that much. Well, again, the measurements aren't that important, but yeah, I don't want to take too much of it. Yeah, it's there's some unevenness to the surface, and well, the variation is 0.03 of a millimeter, and that's plenty sufficient for this for this job. So then tighten all of them, so I'm sure that the workpiece is staying where it should be. Did it change anything? I made it a little bit better actually. Yeah. I'm grinding some square tool bit to make the tool for cutting the groove, and I'm setting it up in this tool holder that came along with a bunch of other tools I bought in a lot. Oh, I'm about to be there. I'm going to make the inside diameter. This threaded hole is also going to be 17 millimeters. And in order not to drill too deep, I'm setting my 0, or rather my -1, like this. This is a feeler gauge, 1 millimeter thick. And the same with the 18 millimeter drill.
I've been meaning to make a chamfering tool, but I haven't come around to it yet. So this is a relatively fast way to chamfer. I'm setting the compound slide to 45 degrees and then chamfer that way. The outside diameters are of course chamfered with the spindle in reverse. This time I'm using it with the round tool bit. It usually makes a very beautiful surface finish. I think that's rather presentable. The finishing cuts I'm making with my fly cutter. With that I'm always sure that the surface will look nice. Again, because I don't have any parallels, I'm using an alternative. These, yeah, it used to be hex. And I'm actually using them for my tool holders in my lathe. For these boring bar holders, so I can fit a simple square tool holder. But they are quite the size is rather precise. So, and again for this task, it's sufficient. Yep. I don't think I want to take any more because we're quite undersized now, and I think this is the rear side of the flange, and it won't be shown. So even though there's a small nick there, yeah. No, I don't think I want to take any more. If he wants to have it cut down, he can come again. But yeah, it's also a bit because of the thickness of the wall here, where the groove is and the and the hole. I don't want to make it any thinner here. So that's it. And now for deburring. Yeah, or rather the chamfering the edges. Is this very soft aluminium, this here, so. I've seen a lot of guys wiping the surface off with their fingers. And actually you should never do that, because you will leave a small film of grease, and then your file won't bind to the material. It will, and also it will clog up the file. So don't do that. Wipe it off with a cloth or blow it off with some compressed air. When you're all finished, you can do that, like I am now. that's it.
I will try to get some photos or some video once Jørn is finished with the build and the parts are in their proper place. Thanks for all the like hits, thanks for all the nice comments, and thanks for subscribing, and of course thank you for watching.